The room was perfect. White tablecloths, candles flickering at every centerpiece. A banner that read, "Congratulations, Leonard. 32 years of excellence," stretched across the back wall of the Riverside Inn banquet hall. 200 people milling around with champagne glasses, laughing, shaking hands, talking about what a remarkable man he was. I had spent 4 months organizing that party. Every flower arrangement, every menu item, every name on the guest list, every frame in the slideshow that was queued up on the laptop sitting in the AV booth at the back of the room. Every single frame. I remember standing at the entrance of that hall, watching Leonard work the room, watching him put his hand on people's shoulders and laugh that big, easy laugh of his. Watching people look at him the way people look at someone who has earned something. Someone who deserves to be celebrated. And I thought about the folder on that laptop. I thought about the 47 screenshots I had spent 3 weeks organizing into a presentation that no one in that room was expecting. I thought about my sister Claudia, sitting at table 7 in a rose gold dress, sipping her wine, completely certain she was safe. People ask me now, "Were you nervous?" And the honest answer is, no. I wasn't nervous. By that night, I had passed through nervous. I had passed through devastated and shattered and sleepless, and every other word you reach for when the 2 people you trusted most in this world have been lying to your face for 3 years. What I felt standing in that doorway was something much quieter than anger. I felt ready. And I want to tell you exactly how I got there. If you've ever stood in a room full of people celebrating someone who was secretly destroying you, or if you've ever loved someone so much that you refused to see what was right in front of you, stay with me. This is one of those stories that doesn't just make you angry. It makes you think carefully about what trust actually means, and what it costs when it's been given to the wrong people. Before we go any further, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Because the stories we tell here aren't just about betrayal. They're about the moment someone finally decides they're done being the last person in the room to know the truth. Those are the stories worth staying for. Now, let me take you back to where this really started. My name is Marianne. I was 53 years old when my world came apart, and came back together, in the span of a single evening. But to understand that evening, you have to understand the 28 years that came before it. I met Leonard when I was 24. He was 29, already working as a project engineer at Callaway Industrial, already wearing the kind of quiet confidence that young women sometimes mistake for stability. He was tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who made you feel like nothing could go wrong when he was in the room. He could fix anything. He remembered everything. He made decisions without hesitating, and he never seemed afraid of anything. I was finishing my master's in education administration. I was cautious and careful and a little too organized for my own good, and Leonard thought that was charming. He used to call me his planner, not as a criticism, as an endearment. He'd find my lists around the house and smile at them. He'd tell people at dinner parties that I was the reason their lives ran on time. We were married in September of 1996, on a Saturday, in the church where my parents had been married before us. My sister Claudia was my maid of honor. I need you to remember that. She stood beside me at that altar. She helped me fasten the buttons on the back of my dress. She cried during the vows, genuinely cried, not polite sniffling, but the kind of crying that means something. After the ceremony, she hugged me and said, "You chose right, Mari. He's one of the good ones." I believed that for 28 years. We built a life the way people build lives when they mean to keep them. We bought a house in a suburb of Columbus, Ohio, a 4-bedroom colonial on Harwick Lane that we painted ourselves and spent 3 summers renovating piece by piece. We had our daughter Kayla in 1998, and I can still picture Leonard in the hospital room, holding her for the first time, his face doing something I had never seen it do before. I stepped back from full-time work when Kayla was born, shifting to part-time consulting for school districts, and for years that arrangement worked. Leonard's career at Callaway grew steadily. He rose from project engineer to senior project manager to division director. He was respected there in the way that people who show up on time, meet their deadlines, and never cause drama tend to be respected. Reliable, consistent, present. That was the word I would have chosen for Leonard in those years, present. He was at every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every Christmas morning and every 4th of July and every one of Kayla's soccer games, standing on the sideline with his arms folded and that quiet smile. Our marriage wasn't perfect, no marriage is, but it was solid. We argued about money sometimes, about his long hours during project deadlines, about my mother coming to visit more than he preferred. We went through a rough patch in our late 40s when Kayla left for college and the house felt too quiet. But we worked through it. We went to 3 sessions of couples counseling, bought new furniture for the bedroom, started walking together in the evenings. I thought we had earned something. By then, I thought the hard years were behind us. My sister Claudia had never married. She'd come close twice, once in her early 30s with a man named Patrick who moved to Seattle for work, and once in her 40s with a man named Brett who she described as emotionally unavailable, which, in Claudia's experience, seemed to be her particular weakness. She was a regional sales manager for a pharmaceutical company, successful and independent, and she lived 40 minutes from us in a condo she'd renovated beautifully. She and I talked 2 or 3 times a week. We had lunch together at least once a month. She came to every Thanksgiving and every Christmas Eve and every birthday that mattered. She and Leonard had always gotten along. They could talk about sports for an hour without either of them getting bored, and she would tease him about his obsession with organizing the garage in a way that made him laugh. They were family. That's the word I keep coming back to. They were family to each other. To me, to all of us. And that is what made everything that came after almost impossible to comprehend. The changes started, or at least the changes I can date precisely, about 18 months before the retirement party. Leonard had already announced his retirement date at that point. After 32 years at Callaway Industrial, he was going to step down in April, the month of his 59th birthday, collect his full pension, and we were going to spend that summer driving up the East Coast, stopping wherever felt right, finally doing the unhurried traveling we'd been promising ourselves since Kayla was in diapers. That was the plan. I had talked to Kayla about it. I had mentioned it to Claudia over lunch one afternoon in October, and she had smiled and said, "God, that sounds wonderful. You two have earned that." She lifted her wine glass when she said it. I remember thinking, yes, we have. The first thing I noticed was the phone. Leonard had always been relaxed about his phone. He'd leave it on the kitchen counter charging, face up, ringer on. He'd hand it to me occasionally to look something up when his hands were occupied. In 28 years of marriage, I had never once felt like his phone was something that belonged to a secret part of his life. Sometime in the fall of that year, the phone started going everywhere with him. Face down on the table at dinner, carried into the bathroom, placed screenside against his thigh on the couch. I noticed it the way you notice a piece of furniture that's been moved slightly. Not alarming, but different. Off. I mentioned it to him once, casually, while we were washing dishes. "Your phone seems attached to you lately." He gave a quick laugh. "New project at work. Warren keeps sending me updates at all hours. You know how he gets." Warren was Leonard's deputy director and his closest colleague at Callaway. I knew Warren well. I liked Warren. That explanation made sense to me. So I filed it away. The second thing I noticed came about 6 weeks later. I was doing laundry on a Sunday afternoon, emptying the pockets of Leonard's jacket before putting it in the wash, the way I'd done thousands of times over the decades. Loose change, an old receipt from the gas station, a pen, and a folded slip of paper from a hotel, the Granville Suites downtown, a printout of a reservation confirmation. 2 nights, mid-October, a room. I stood there with that paper in my hand for a long moment. Then I thought, work dinner, client entertainment. Callaway books rooms for out-of-town clients, they've done it for years. Leonard has arranged these events before. I walked into the living room and asked him about it, folded slip in hand, keeping my voice even. He looked at it, looked at me, and said, "Oh, yeah, Callaway put up the Henderson team for 2 nights. I was managing the reservation. Didn't I mention that? He said it so easily, no hesitation, no flicker of anything behind his eyes. I don't think you did, I said. Sorry, Mari, it was just a logistics thing, nothing interesting. I nodded. I put the paper down. I went back to the laundry. But I kept the slip. I'm not sure why. I didn't put it in a folder or take a photograph of it. I just placed it in the small dish on my nightstand, where I keep hair ties and a spare pair of earrings and things I don't want to lose. It sat there for weeks, and sometimes I'd glance at it before turning out the light, and something small and nameless would move through me, and then I'd push it aside. The third thing was Claudia. We had always talked constantly. Since we were girls, we had the kind of relationship where 2 days of silence felt unusual. We texted during commercials. We called each other on the drive home from anywhere. Starting around November, she got harder to reach. Not impossible, not gone, just slightly harder to reach. Texts answered a little more slowly, phone calls going to voicemail once or twice before she picked up, lunch postponed twice in a row because of work travel. I noticed it. I didn't think much of it. She had a demanding job. She was in her late 40s and going through her own transitions. I told myself I was being clingy, needing too much from her at a time when maybe she needed space. But there was one afternoon in December. I was making Christmas cookie dough, phone wedged between my shoulder and ear, trying to confirm plans for Christmas Eve. And when Claudia finally picked up, there was a fraction of a second before she spoke. A hesitation so small that I almost didn't register it. And then her voice. Hey, Mari. Sorry, I was just... And then she composed herself and became completely normal. I thought, she's stressed about the holidays. I did not think, she's afraid of something. I should have. January came cold and gray, and Leonard started working late 2 or 3 evenings a week. This wasn't completely out of character. He had always had stretches of long hours before major project milestones, but something about the pattern felt different. When I'd ask how work was, his answers were short. Fine, busy. You know how it is this time of year. He also started going to the gym earlier than usual. He'd been a consistent but casual gym goer for years. 3 mornings a week, leaving the house at 6:15, back by 7:30. Now he was going 4 or 5 mornings a week, and sometimes not back until 8:30 or 9. I told myself, he's preparing for retirement. He wants to be healthier. This is good. My best friend Donna, who I'd known since our daughters were in kindergarten together and who worked with me at the school district, met me for coffee one Saturday in February, and I remember telling her about Leonard's upcoming retirement as we sat in the corner booth of the cafe we'd been coming to for a decade. I was animated about it. I talked about the East Coast trip and the garden I was planning to finally put in properly, and Leonard finally having time to come to my mother's birthday without it being a scheduling crisis. Donna listened in the way she always listened, quietly, completely, the kind of listening that doesn't interrupt. And when I finished, she said, "That sounds like a really good year coming." She paused, just briefly. "It does," I said. I didn't notice the pause then. I would remember it later. The discovery that broke the first wall open happened on a Thursday evening in March. Leonard had gone to bed early, said he had a headache, and I was in the kitchen going through the month's shared expenses, the way I did every month, balancing our accounts before I filed everything in the folder I kept in the home office. I was on our shared laptop when I went to open our bank account portal and noticed, in the browser's recent history, a tab that had been opened and not fully cleared, a confirmation page for a reservation at a boutique hotel in Cincinnati. The reservation was under Leonard's name. The dates were the last weekend in February. The last weekend in February was the weekend he had told me he was at a Callaway executive retreat in Dayton. I sat very still for a long moment. Then I opened the account portal and went back through the last 6 months of statements. I had handled our joint account forever, but I had never looked at it with suspicion. I had never looked for anything. I had always trusted what Leonard told me about his expenses. Now I looked. There were cash withdrawals I couldn't explain. Not enormous amounts, 300 here, 200 there, but consistent. Almost every 2 weeks. Cash. In a household where we almost never used cash. There was a charge to a jewelry retailer I didn't recognize, dated November of the prior year. There's a real power in just being present. It's about those quiet moments and the honest truths that bring us all together. On a Tuesday evening when he had told me he was working late, I took my phone and photographed every page of the statement. Then I closed the laptop, sat in the quiet of my kitchen, and made myself breathe. I did not cry yet. Something very deliberate took over in me, something that felt almost clinical. I thought, I need to know the truth before I say a single word. The next piece came not from anything I found, but from something I remembered. A week after the bank statement discovery, I was going through an old drawer in the home office looking for a document I needed, and I found Leonard's previous work phone, an older model he'd kept when Callaway upgraded their devices, now sitting in a drawer with a cracked screen protector and a charging cable wrapped around it. I plugged it in without thinking about it. The device was old enough that it came up without requiring a new passcode, just the old 4-digit PIN that Leonard had used for every device since forever. I knew it because he'd given it to me once to look up a restaurant address when his hands were full. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I want to be honest about that. But when the phone came on and I opened the messages, mostly old work threads, a few texts from Kayla from years back, I found a conversation thread near the top that had no name attached to it. Just the letter C. I opened it. The most recent message in the thread was dated 7 months prior. It was worth it, the message said. Every minute. And Leonard had replied, "You make everything feel possible." I read those 2 messages 4 times. And then I looked at the send number at the top of the thread, because the contact had been listed only as C with no full name, and I screenshot it. I did not confront Leonard that night. I did not say anything. I went to bed and lay in the dark beside him and listened to him breathe, and I made a list in my head of everything I still needed to know before I understood what this actually was. The number in that old message thread. I knew I'd seen it. I spent 2 days turning it over in my mind before I opened my own phone and started scrolling through my contacts, looking for it. I found it in less than a minute. The number belonged to my sister Claudia. I can describe what happened to my body when that registered, but no language quite reaches it. It wasn't the electric shock of sudden discovery. It was something slower and more terrible. The feeling of a floor giving way beneath you so gradually that you had time to watch it happen. I set my phone face down on the counter. I went to the sink and ran cold water over my wrists, the way my mother used to tell me to do when I was upset as a child. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and I let myself really think about it. Not Claudia and Leonard as an abstract betrayal, not as a shocking headline in my own life. I made myself think about it concretely, specifically, as 2 people I had known for my entire adult life. Her standing at my altar, him in the hospital holding our daughter, her at every Christmas Eve table. Him saying you make everything feel possible to her on a phone he thought I would never find. 3 years before that retirement party, I had no idea I was living inside someone else's secret. I needed to understand how deep this went. 2 days after finding the number, I called Donna. I didn't tell her everything. I told her I had reason to believe Leonard might have been seeing someone, and I asked her if she had ever seen or heard anything that she hadn't mentioned to me out of kindness. There was a silence on the phone that lasted long enough to tell me everything. Donna. Mari, She stopped, started again. Back in October, I saw them at Renata's, the Italian place on 5th. They were at a corner table, and I wasn't sure what I was seeing, and I didn't want to. I mean, they're family. I thought maybe there was an innocent... When in October? The 17th. I remember because it was the day after my mother's birthday. The 17th. I went back to the bank statements I'd photographed. The hotel reservation, the Granville Suites, had been October 15th and 16th. The evening after the hotel checkout, Leonard and my sister Claudia had been at dinner together. Donna was crying quietly on the phone. She kept saying she was sorry, that she should have told me, that she didn't know how. "Don't apologize," I said. "You helped me more than you know." And I meant it. Because Donna's confirmation had just eliminated the last possibility that I was misreading something. There was nothing left to misread. I found it on a Saturday morning in late March. I wasn't searching for it, not exactly. I was looking in Leonard's car for the parking garage card we shared, which he sometimes left in the center console, and my hand went under the front seat by accident, the way hands do when you're feeling around for something small. My fingers touched something flat and rectangular. It was a phone, a prepaid smartphone, no case, no identifying marks. I sat in the driver's seat of Leonard's car with that phone in my hand. I was still in my pajamas. The garage door was closed. The house was quiet because Leonard had gone to the hardware store. The phone had no pin lock. Either he'd gotten careless or he'd never imagined I would find it. I opened the photos first. There were 73 photographs. I forced myself to look at every one. Some were landscapes, pictures from trips I hadn't known about, Cincinnati, Chicago, a lakeside somewhere that I couldn't immediately identify. And in many of them, my sister Claudia. Not posed photos, candid ones, hotel rooms, restaurants, a dock somewhere with water behind them. Claudia laughing, Claudia asleep on a couch. Leonard's hand across a table reaching for hers. I scrolled through all 73. Then I opened the messages. The conversation thread with Claudia on this phone went back 2 years and 8 months. 2 years and 8 months. I am not going to read you the messages in detail, because some things that wound you deeply don't need to be shared with the world to be understood. What I will tell you is this: reading those messages was not like discovering an affair. It was like discovering that a parallel life existed, a version of my husband and my sister that had been running alongside my version of them for almost 3 years, hidden perfectly in the margin of my ordinary days. They had fought. They had apologized to each other. They had made plans. They had laughed about things that happened at our family dinners. They had discussed the future in ways that made my chest close. And I found one exchange that I keep coming back to, because it changed everything I thought I understood about what was happening. It was from about 4 months before the retirement party. Claudia had written, "Have you decided when you're going to tell her?" Leonard had written back, "After the pension processes. I need to make sure everything is settled first. Then we'll deal with it. She's going to be devastated. She'll manage. She's always been practical. And the party? Let her have her party. It'll be the last thing she organizes for me." I read that exchange 3 times. Then I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it, exactly as I'd found it. I went inside, I showered and dressed, and by the time Leonard came home from the hardware store, I was in the kitchen making lunch, and I smiled at him when he walked in and asked if he'd found the weather stripping he needed. "Got it," he said, holding up the bag. "Perfect," I said. And that was the day I stopped being someone who was trying to understand what was happening and became someone who was deciding what to do about it. I want you to understand something about that exchange, about Leonard's decision to wait until after the pension processes. Because this wasn't simply a man having an affair and lacking the courage to leave cleanly. What I was looking at was a strategy. After 32 years at Callaway, Leonard's pension was substantial. But pension processing and divorce have a complicated relationship under Ohio law. Depending on timing and documentation, a spouse is entitled to a portion of a pension accrued during the marriage. Leonard had been at Callaway for the entire span of our marriage. A qualified domestic relations order, a QDRO, could grant me a significant share of what he'd earned. I didn't know any of this yet, but I was about to learn it. The following week, I made an appointment with a family law attorney named Sandra Okafor, whose name I found through a recommendation from a colleague who had gone through a difficult divorce 2 years earlier. I told her I needed information, not action yet. I needed to understand my position. We met for 90 minutes in her office downtown. I brought the photographed bank statements, the screenshotted messages, and a handwritten timeline I'd constructed from memory and records. Sandra Okafor had been practicing family law for 21 years. She didn't react dramatically to anything I said. She listened, asked careful questions, and at the end of our meeting she leaned forward and said, "You've been more thorough than most people who've been through this for years. Here's what you need to know." She walked me through my rights. She walked me through the pension. She told me that if Leonard had already consulted a divorce attorney, which, given the timeline and that message about getting everything settled, she suspected he might have, then the filing and timing would matter. "Has he changed any beneficiaries on life insurance or retirement accounts that you know of?" I told her I didn't know. "That's the first thing you need to find out." Quietly. I went home and accessed our financial accounts I had technically always had access to, but had largely handed over to Leonard to manage. I found the beneficiary designations on his 401k and the 2 life insurance policies. Both had been updated 8 months ago. Both now listed Kayla as the primary beneficiary. My first reaction was almost relieved. Kayla, of course, our daughter. But I kept looking. On one of the policies, there was a secondary beneficiary. A name I recognized but hadn't seen on a financial document before. Claudia Mercer. My sister's full name. I photographed everything. Then I called Sandra Okafor and told her what I'd found. "So he has been planning this," she said. "Not a question." "For a long time," I told her. "Okay, here's what we're going to do." What I discovered next came not from financial records or secret phones, but from our own email account, the joint household account Leonard and I had used for years for bills and family correspondence. I was going through it looking for a contractor estimate from the previous year when I saw an email from a law firm I didn't recognize. Harrigan & Cole, attorneys at law. The subject line, initial consultation, estate planning and asset review. The email was from 11 months ago. I opened it. It was a routine follow-up from a paralegal, confirming that their office had received Leonard's materials and that Attorney Cole would be in touch within 5 business days to schedule a second appointment. Estate planning and asset review. I searched the inbox for every email from Harrigan & Cole. There were 4, spread over 8 months, all professionally phrased, all completely unrevealing in their language. But the timeline was clear. Leonard had begun consulting a law firm about his assets almost a year before his retirement date. And he had done it without telling me. I forwarded every email to Sandra Okafor's address with a single line. "I think he's been planning the exit longer than we thought." Her reply came within the hour. "This changes the approach. Can you come in tomorrow morning?" I rearranged my schedule. I went. There were 61 days between the day I found the second phone and the date of the retirement party. I want you to understand what those 61 days looked like from the outside. From the outside, completely normal. I organized the retirement party. I called the Riverside Inn and confirmed the venue, the catering, the bar arrangements. I ordered the centerpieces. I coordinated the guest list with Leonard's assistant at Callaway, a woman named Patricia who had worked with him for 15 years and who was deeply invested in making the event perfect. I arranged the slideshow tribute. I spoke to Kayla on the phone twice a week. I had lunch with Claudia twice, once in March, once in early April, and both times I smiled and asked about her work, and listened to her talk, and gave her absolutely no reason to believe that anything had changed. It was the most exhausting performance of my life, and also the most clarifying. Because every time I sat across from Claudia and watched her be warm and sisterly and completely composed, something was solidifying inside me. Not rage, not grief, though grief was there too, always moving beneath everything. Something more structural than either of those. Resolve. From the inside of those 61 days, I was building a case. Sandra Okafor had filed the divorce paperwork but held it. She was waiting for my instruction on when to serve him, and we had agreed that timing mattered. She had also connected me with a financial forensics professional named Dennis Huang, who reviewed the account history I'd assembled and confirmed that the pattern of cash withdrawals over the preceding 18 months was consistent with funds being moved or spent outside the household in ways that would matter in a divorce proceeding. I had a copy of every financial statement, every beneficiary designation, every bank record I could access. I had the screenshots from the old work phone. I had the photographs I'd taken of Leonard's secret prepaid phone, 73 photos and a message history going back 2 years and 8 months. I had Donna's corroboration. I had the hotel receipts. I had the emails from Harrigan and Cole. And I had the message where Leonard told my sister, "Let her have her party. It'll be the last thing she organizes for me." I thought about that sentence every single day. There was one conversation during those 61 days that I haven't been able to forget. It was 3 weeks before the party. Kayla had come home for a long weekend, and on Saturday evening after dinner, Leonard had taken her outside to look at something in the garden, and I was in the kitchen loading the dishwasher, and I heard them through the screen door. Kayla was talking about her job, about a difficult project she was navigating, and Leonard was giving her advice in that steady, measured way of his. He was being a good father, patient and thoughtful and genuinely present. I stood at the dishwasher and let myself feel that fully, the specific pain of watching someone be genuinely good at one thing while being devastating in another. He loved Kayla, that was real. Everything else he'd shown me in 30 years, the reliability, the steadiness, the "I'll never give you a reason not to trust me," that had been real too, or had felt real, and the fact that it had coexisted with this other thing, this parallel life he'd been building quietly in the margins, was something I was going to be sorting out for a long time after the party. But I wasn't going to sort it out in private. Not after "Let her have her party. It'll be the last thing she organizes for me." Not after 3 years. Not after my sister's name on a life insurance beneficiary line. I had a conversation with Kayla the weekend before the party. I told her. I sat across from my daughter at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee between my hands, and I told her the truth. Not everything, not every terrible detail, but the essential shape of it. That her father had been having an affair with Aunt Claudia. That it had been going on for nearly 3 years. That I had evidence I couldn't argue with. That he had been consulting a lawyer to plan his exit without giving me fair warning or any chance to protect myself. I watched Kayla's face go through something wordless and terrible. She didn't speak for a very long time. When she did, her voice was flat. "How long have you known?" "About 2 months. And you've been..." She shook her head. "You've been acting like everything was normal?" I needed time to make sure I was in the right position. "Mom, I know." She got up and paced the length of the kitchen twice. Then she stopped and looked at me. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to give him the retirement party he deserves," I said. Something crossed her face, something that wasn't quite a smile but was close to it. "What do you need from me?" "I need you at the party. I need you to trust me. And I need you to stay calm no matter what happens." She sat back down. She looked at me across the table the way she used to look at me when she was small and I was explaining something important. "Okay," she said. "I'm with you." April 12th. The Riverside Inn Banquet Hall. 200 people. Leonard's Callaway colleagues and executives. Family, friends, neighbors. People from every chapter of our shared life. His parents were there. His mother in a pale blue dress she'd bought specifically for the occasion. My parents were there. Our neighbors Dave and Carol, who had lived across from us on Harwick Lane for 20 years. Kayla, in a deep green dress, standing near the entrance when I arrived. She looked at me and gave a small nod. I had arrived an hour early to oversee the setup. The AV coordinator, a young man from the venue named Chris, had set up the projector and the laptop exactly where I'd requested. I had given him a USB drive the week before, with the presentation files on it, labeled Tribute Slideshow, Final Version, and confirmed twice that it was queued and ready. He had no idea what was on it. The room filled by 7 o'clock. The dinner service was beautiful. I had chosen the menu with care. Roasted salmon, seasonal vegetables, a warm bread service, everything timed perfectly. People ate and talked and laughed and raised glasses, and Leonard moved from table to table with that easy warmth of his, accepting congratulations, telling stories, being exactly who everyone believed he was. Claudia arrived at 7:15, table 7, rose gold dress, hair done. She hugged my mother. She hugged Leonard's mother. She came to where I was standing near the bar and hugged me, holding on for a moment, and said, "You did an amazing job, Mari. This whole place looks incredible." "Thank you," I said. "I wanted it to be perfect." She pulled back and looked at me with those familiar eyes, my sister's eyes, that I had known my entire life, and smiled, and went to find her seat. The program began at 8:30. Patricia from Callaway gave the first tribute. She was funny and warm and told a story about Leonard handling a major client crisis that made the whole room laugh. Callaway's vice president gave a short speech about Leonard's 32 years and presented him with a plaque and a modest gift envelope that brought applause. Then it was Leonard's turn to speak. He stood at the podium in his good navy suit, and he was, and I am not being dishonest here, genuinely moving. He talked about what the work had meant to him. He thanked his team. He mentioned specific colleagues by name, their contributions, their loyalty. He talked about how much Callaway had given his family. And then he looked directly at me, across the room. "And most of all," he said, "I have to thank my wife, Marianne. 28 years. She kept everything running. She made everything possible." There was warm applause. I smiled at him from across the room. He smiled back. And then I picked up my glass of water and watched him step away from the podium, and I looked at the AV booth at the back of the room, where Chris had his hand on the laptop, and I thought about a message on a prepaid phone. Let her have her party. It'll be the last thing she organizes for me. The program coordinator stepped to the microphone. And now, we have a special tribute presentation prepared by Marianne. 32 years of memories from the woman who knew him best. I stood. I want to be very precise about what I did and did not do at that podium, because I've heard it described differently since then. I was not hysterical. I did not scream. I did not cry. Not then, not in that room. I walked to the microphone, and I smoothed the front of my dress, and I looked out at 200 faces looking back at me expectantly. Kayla, near the front, completely still. Claudia at table 7, holding her wine glass with both hands. "I've been married to Leonard for 28 years, I began. In that time, I have supported his career at every turn. I've managed our home, raised our daughter, moved my career around his schedule, and spent the last 4 months organizing this party because I believed, genuinely believed, that he deserved to be celebrated." The room was very quiet. The tone of my voice had already told them something was different. "I want to show you something tonight, a real tribute, not just to the man you know from Callaway, but to the life we built. And a few things that were built in the margins of that life without my knowledge." I nodded to Chris at the back of the room. The projector screen lit up. The first slide was a wedding photograph. Leonard and me, September 1996, at the church. Beautiful and young and certain. The room made a warm sound. The second slide was the same photograph, but on the right side of the frame was a second image, Claudia and Leonard at a restaurant, a candid photo from one of the 73 on the secret phone, their hands across the table. The warm sound in the room shifted into silence. "This is my sister Claudia," I said. "My maid of honor at our wedding. She's sitting at table 7 tonight." I did not look at Claudia. I did not look at Leonard. I looked at the room. The third slide was a hotel confirmation. The Granville Suites, October 15th, beside a photo from the secret phone of Leonard and Claudia, at what appeared to be a hotel room, only identifiable by the window view and the bedside lamp behind them. Someone in the room made a sharp sound. I don't know who. The fourth slide was the timeline, black text on white. 18 months of dates and locations and cash withdrawals laid out simply and without commentary. The fifth slide was the beneficiary change, Claudia Mercer, secondary beneficiary on a life insurance policy with the date it had been changed. The sixth slide was the message, the one I had memorized. Let her have her party. It'll be the last thing she organizes for me. I let that slide stay on the screen for a long moment. I organized this party, I said, because I believe in honoring things that are real. And I believe in letting people see clearly. I turned from the podium and looked at Leonard for the first time since I'd stood up. His face had gone the color of old concrete. Enjoy your retirement, Leonard. Then I turned to table 7. Claudia was standing, her wine glass still in her hand, her face working through something I can only describe as exposure. The look of someone who has been in a shadow for a very long time and suddenly has light on every side. And Claudia, you stood next to me at my altar. I hope it was worth it. I set the microphone down on the podium with a quiet click. I picked up my purse from the chair I had placed near the stage for exactly this reason, and I walked toward the exit. There was no quiet exit, of course. The room behind me erupted the moment I stepped away from the microphone. I could hear it, voices overlapping, chairs pushing back, Leonard saying something loudly that I chose not to hear. Someone called my name. I walked. Donna was at the front entrance. I had texted her 2 hours before the party, told her what I was planning, asked her to be there. She had her car running at the curb. I got in. We drove. She didn't say anything for the first 5 minutes. Then she said, "How are you doing?" I looked out the passenger window at the city going by. "I feel like I can breathe," I said. And that was exactly true. Leonard was served the divorce papers the following morning. Sandra Okafor had timed the filing carefully, and the papers arrived via process server at 9:15 a.m., while Leonard was still at the house, a house that was, under our instructions to Sandra, about to become part of a very specific set of legal negotiations. He called me 11 times that day. I answered once, briefly, to tell him that I had retained counsel and that all further communication should go through my attorney. Then I hung up. Claudia called 6 times. I didn't answer. My mother called that evening. Marianne. Her voice was shaken but steady. "I was there. I saw it." "I know, Mom. Are you all right?" "I'm going to be." A pause. Then, "I want you to know that your father and I are completely on your side, and that we will need time with Claudia before we have anything more to say about her." "That's fair. She will not be at Easter." It was not a question. "That's your call to make," I said. But we both knew it wasn't really a question. The professional consequences for Leonard were quiet but real. He had retired. He couldn't be fired from a job he no longer had. But the community at Callaway is not a large one, and what happened at that party did not stay inside the Riverside Inn. Patricia, who had given that warm tribute speech the night before, sent me a text message 3 days later that said only, "I'm so sorry, Marianne. You deserved better." Several of Leonard's colleagues whom I had known socially for years went silent. Not dramatically, they didn't make statements or take sides publicly, but they withdrew. Invitations that might have been extended weren't. The retirement that was supposed to be the beginning of a second chapter became instead something complicated and slightly tainted, something that required explanation at every social encounter for the foreseeable future. Leonard had wanted his retirement to feel like a triumph. Instead, every person in that room who had watched that slideshow would carry it. Claudia lost more than I expected. She didn't lose her job, of course, or her apartment, or most of her surface life. But family is not a surface thing. My parents needed months to process what had happened. Leonard's mother, who had always been fond of Claudia, went cold. The extended family, the cousins and aunts and family friends who had been at that party or heard about it, redistributed their loyalty with a speed that I think surprised Claudia more than almost anything. She sent me a letter, 3 weeks after the party. Handwritten, 4 pages. I read it twice and then placed it in the folder with all the other evidence and documents. I have not responded to it. I may, one day, but not yet. The divorce took 11 months. I will not walk you through every procedural detail because some of it was genuinely tedious, and that's not the point. The point is that Sandra Okafor was thorough and relentless, and the financial documentation I had assembled, the withdrawals, the beneficiary changes, the records of assets that had been underdisclosed in Leonard's initial filings, all of it mattered. The pension I had spent 28 years indirectly building by supporting Leonard's career, by managing our home, by being the infrastructure of his life, was divided as a marital asset. I received my share. I was also awarded the house on Harwick Lane. I chose to sell it rather than stay, not because I couldn't manage it, but because I wanted to live somewhere that was entirely mine, without a single room that belonged to a life I was done with. I moved into a smaller house on the other side of Columbus, in the early spring, 14 months after the retirement party. It had a garden. I planted it myself. I got the tomatoes wrong the first year, and did better the second. Kayla came to help me move in. We spent the first night on the floor of the living room because the furniture hadn't arrived yet, eating takeout from the Thai place 2 blocks away, talking until 1 in the morning about everything and nothing. "You know what I keep thinking," she said, at some point in the evening. "What?" "You planned that presentation for weeks. You had to sit across from both of them multiple times knowing what you knew. How did you do that?" I thought about it honestly. "I think because I was very clear about what I wanted," I said. "I didn't want revenge, exactly. I wanted everyone who had watched him be celebrated to also have the chance to see who he actually was. He wanted that night to be his. And he got it, just not the version he planned." Kayla was quiet for a moment. "Do you feel bad about the people at the party, the colleagues, Leonard's parents?" "Yes," I said. "I do. That part wasn't painless for me. But you still did it." Because the alternative was letting him walk out on his own terms, with his reputation intact and his pension sorted, and me left standing here trying to explain to people why my marriage ended without having any way to tell them the truth. She nodded slowly. "Yeah," she said. "Yeah. It's been 2 years now. I don't spend much time being angry anymore. That surprised me. I expected the anger to stick around longer. But I think anger requires a certain kind of sustained uncertainty, a constant wondering about what's true and what isn't, and I don't have that anymore. I know what's true. I've known for a while. Leonard lives in a condominium outside the city. He and Claudia are together, as far as I know. They are not married, and I haven't asked and don't intend to. Whatever they are to each other, that is between them and whatever version of themselves they're comfortable being. I am 55 years old. I returned to full-time work as an educational consultant, and I am genuinely good at it. I have dinner with Donna every other week. I have rebuilt my relationship with my parents, which the past 2 years of all of us understanding the same truth has made easier, not harder. I did the East Coast trip, not with Leonard, with Donna and her sister, 3 weeks last October. We drove from Columbus to Bar Harbor, Maine, stopping wherever felt right. I stood on a dock in the early morning somewhere in Rhode Island, watching the water go flat and silver. And I thought about how I had imagined that trip for so many years as something I would experience with my husband. And I thought, this is also good. This is its own kind of good. That's the truth I want to leave you with. Not that betrayal doesn't hurt. It does. It hollows you out in ways that take years to fill in. Not that justice makes everything whole. It doesn't. Not completely. But there is something that happens when you stop performing normalcy. Stop accepting crumbs of a life you deserve in full. Stop protecting someone else's reputation at the cost of your own reality. Something opens up. I organized one last thing for Leonard, a party that told the truth about who we were, and who he had become, and what I was no longer willing to be silent about. And then I walked out the door, and I organized everything else for myself. If you're watching this, I want to ask you something. Marianne spent almost 2 months knowing everything, sitting across from her husband, sitting across from her sister, before she made her move. She didn't confront them privately. She didn't give them the chance to manage the narrative. She chose the most public moment of his life, and she gave everyone in that room the truth. Some people think that was right. Some people think she should have walked away quietly and let the divorce speak for itself. So I want to hear from you. Was Marianne right to do it publicly? Should she have confronted them in private and walked away without the party? Or did every person in that room, his family, his colleagues, his friends, deserve to know the truth? Leave your answer in the comments. I genuinely read them, and stories like this one always bring out the most honest answers from people who have been through something similar. And if you want more stories about real people who reached their limit, who stopped accepting the life that was being decided for them, and who chose themselves, sometimes quietly, sometimes in front of 200 people at a retirement party, subscribe and stay with us, because the next story is waiting, and it's one you won't see coming.